The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. A sterile cage where my shattered body lay tethered to machines that beeped like a countdown to oblivion. I was alive. Barely. After a car crash that left my legs mangled and my heart in worse shape. But the real blow came when I overheard the nurses whispering. My parents and sister were boarding a plane to Italy, leaving me behind without a word. I'd always been the black sheep. The reckless son who chased dreams of music over the family's obsession with wealth and status. My father, a real estate tycoon, saw my guitar as a rebellion, not a passion. My mother, ever the peacemaker, tried to bridge the gap, but always sided with him in the end. And my sister, Clara, 5 years younger and the golden child, soaked up their adoration like a sponge. When I skidded off that rain-slicked highway at 2 a.m., I didn't expect a parade, but I thought they'd at least show up. Instead, they'd packed their bags for a long-planned family trip to Florence, as if my survival was an inconvenience. The first day in the hospital, I gripped the cold metal railing of my bed, my knuckles white, trying to process their absence. My phone, cracked but functional, held no messages from them, just a single text from Clara the night of the crash. Hope you're okay. Call us when you wake up. That was it. No follow-up. No voicemails. No frantic visits. I called, of course, but their phones were off, probably already sipping espresso in some Tuscan villa. The betrayal cut deeper than the shards of glass they'd pulled from my arm. By day 3, I wasn't alone anymore. Ellie, my ex-girlfriend and the only person who'd bothered to show up, sat by my side, her dark eyes brimming with a mix of pity and fury. We'd broken up 6 months ago after I pushed her away, too caught up in my music to notice her slipping through my fingers. But here she was, holding my hand, her presence a lifeline in the sterile void. They left you, Nate, she said, her voice trembling. They left you like you were nothing. I wanted to argue, to defend them, but the truth was a weight I couldn't lift. My family had always prioritized their image-perfect vacations. Perfect daughter. Perfect life. I was the glitch in their system. And now, broken and useless, I'd been discarded. Ellie, though, saw something worth saving. She dug through my hospital bag, found my notebook of half-written songs, and read them aloud, her voice cracking on the lyrics about loneliness I'd never shared. You're not alone, she whispered, and for the first time since the crash, I believed it. The hospital became our war room. Ellie brought her laptop, and we scoured social media for clues about my family's trip. Clara's Instagram was a gallery of sun-drenched selfies, her laughing in a vineyard, my parents clinking wine glasses under a pergola. Not a single mention of me. The rage built slowly, a fire stoked by every carefree post. Ellie, ever practical, suggested we focus on what we could control. They'll come back, she said. And when they do, they'll face you. But you need to be ready. Ready meant healing. Not just my body, but my soul. Physical therapy was brutal. Every step felt like walking on knives, but Ellie was there, cheering me on, her stubborn optimism infectious. She also started digging deeper, uncovering details about the trip that didn't add up. The family vacation was a cover, she suspected, for something bigger. My father had been cagey about his business lately, and Clara's posts mentioned meetings with investors in Florence. Investors? For what? By the end of the week, I could hobble on crutches. And Ellie had a theory. My father was using the trip to seal a shady real estate deal, one he didn't want me sniffing around. I'd overheard him once, months ago, talking about offshore accounts and discretion. At the time, I thought it was just his usual arrogance. Now, it felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place. We need proof, Ellie said, her jaw set. If they're hiding something, we'll find it. That night, as the hospital lights dimmed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. My family had abandoned me, but they'd underestimated me. They didn't know I had Ellie. or that the fire they'd left smoldering in me was about to ignite. They'd left for Italy, thinking they'd escape their problems. They had no idea what was waiting for them when they returned. The hospital discharged me on day 10. My legs still weak, but my resolve ironclad. Ellie drove me to my apartment, a cramped loft cluttered with guitar picks and unpaid bills. The silence there was louder than the hospital's beeps, a reminder of how alone I'd been even before the crash. But Ellie didn't let me wallow. She set up her laptop on my coffee table, her fingers flying as she hacked into my father's old email account, something I'd never dared to do. "He used your birthday as his password," she said, shaking her head. Arrogant and predictable. What we found was a goldmine. Emails to a man named Marco Vitelli, an Italian real estate developer, outlined a deal to buy a string of historic villas in Tuscany. The numbers were staggering, millions of dollars funneled through shell companies. My father's messages were careful, but one phrase stood out: "Ensure the funds are untraceable." Ellie's eyes met mine, and I knew we were onto something. This wasn't just a vacation. It was a cover for laundering money. I felt sick, not from pain meds, but from the betrayal. My father had always preached family values. Yet here he was, risking everything for dirty cash. And Clara, her emails, linked to the same account, showed she wasn't just along for the ride. She'd been drafting contracts, playing the dutiful daughter while facilitating his scheme. My mother, as usual, seemed oblivious, her emails full of sightseeing plans and dinner reservations. Ellie and I spent hours cross-referencing names and dates. Marco Vitelli had a reputation for shady deals, and my father's company had been bleeding money for years. This deal was his lifeline, but it was built on lies. "We need to go deeper," Ellie said, pulling up a dark web forum she'd accessed through a friend. There, whispers of Vitelli's ties to organized crime surfaced. My stomach churned. My family wasn't just greedy, they were in over their heads. The next day, I called my cousin Leo, the only family member I trusted. He was a private investigator, estranged from my father for reasons I never fully understood. Over coffee, I spilled everything. Leo's face darkened as he listened. "Your dad's been dodging taxes for years," he said. I warned him, but he cut me off. "If he's with Vitelli, he's playing with fire." Leo agreed to help, but he needed time to dig into Vitelli's network. Meanwhile, Ellie and I kept tabs on my family's movements through Clara's social media. Her latest post showed them at a gala in Florence. My father shaking hands with a man who matched Vitelli's description. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings." I wanted to scream. New beginnings, built on my abandonment. Physical therapy became my outlet, each grueling session a chance to channel my anger. I pushed harder, ignoring the pain, determined to walk without crutches by the time they returned. Ellie, meanwhile, was relentless. She found a whistleblower in Vitelli's company, a nervous accountant named Sophia who'd been CC'd on some of the emails. Over a secure call, Sophia confirmed our worst fears. The villas were a front for laundering money from illegal arms deals. My father wasn't just a crook, was complicit in something far uglier. The weight of it nearly broke me. I'd spent years resenting my family's coldness, but this was a new low. Ellie, sensing my spiral, pulled me back. "We're not just exposing them," she said, her voice fierce. "We're protecting others from getting hurt by this." Her words lit a spark. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. By the end of the second week, Leo had a lead, a paper trail linking Vitelli's company to a bank in Cyprus. He needed more time to trace the funds, but time was running out. Clara's posts hinted they'd be back in a week. I lay awake that night, imagining confronting them. Would they beg for forgiveness? Deny everything? The uncertainty gnawed at me. But one thing was clear: when they stepped off that plane, I'd be ready to face them, not as their broken son, but as the man who'd unravel their lies. The days blurred into a haze of pain and purpose. My legs were stronger, But each step reminded me of the crash and the family who'd left me to pick up the pieces. Ellie and I worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle of my father's deal. Leo's updates were sporadic but promising. He'd found a money trail leading from Cyprus to a shell company in Panama. The deeper we dug, the dirtier it got. Vitelli wasn't just a shady developer, was a front for a syndicate moving cash through real estate. Ellie's whistleblower, Sophia, became our lifeline. Over encrypted calls, she fed us documents, bank statements, forged titles, and emails where my father promised Vitelli discretion for a cut of the profits. Clara's role stung the most. She wasn't just following orders, she was negotiating terms. Her emails polished and ruthless. My little sister, the one I'd taught to ride a bike, was neck-deep in this filth. I wanted to believe she'd been coerced, but her words were too calculated, too eager. One night, Ellie found a photo from the Florence Gala, zoomed in on my father's hand. He wore a ring I didn't recognize, engraved with a symbol that matched a syndicate logo Leo had flagged. It was a small detail, but it felt like a noose tightening. They're not just greedy, Ellie said, her voice low. They're dangerous. I nodded, my throat tight. I'd spent years running from my family's expectations, but now I was chasing their secrets, and they were darker than I'd imagined. Leo warned us to tread carefully. Vitelli's people don't play, he said. If they know you're sniffing around, they won't hesitate to silence you. The thought sent a chill through me, but Ellie was unfazed. She'd started cross-referencing Vitelli's associates, building a web of names and aliases. One name popped up repeatedly, Antonio Rossi, a lawyer with ties to the syndicate. He'd been at the gala, posing with my mother in Clara's photos. My mother, always clueless, was smiling like she was at a charity event, not a den of criminals. I threw myself into physical therapy, determined to be whole when I faced them. The pain was a reminder of what I'd survived and what I'd overcome. Ellie, meanwhile, was a force of nature. She'd tracked down a journalist, Mia, who specialized in exposing financial crimes. Mia was skeptical at first, but Sophia's documents changed her tune. This is big, she said over a call. If we can verify the money trail, we can blow this wide open. The plan was forming: expose the deal, protect the innocent, and make my family answer for their choices. But doubt crept in. What if my father doubled down? What if Clara turned on me? And my mother, would she ever forgive me for tearing their world apart? Ellie sensed my hesitation. You're not destroying them, she said, her hand on mine. They did this to themselves. You're just shining a light. By day 20, Leo had a breakthrough, a leaked wire transfer linking my father's company to Vitelli's syndicate. It was the smoking gun we needed. Mia was ready to publish, but she needed one more piece, proof of my family's intent. Ellie suggested we bait them. When they land, she said, we confront them with what we know. Record it. They'll slip. It was risky, but I agreed. I wasn't the broken man they'd left behind, I was their reckoning. That night, I dreamed of the crash, the screech of tires, the shatter of glass, and the cold rain on my face. But in the dream, I walked away, whole and unafraid. When I woke, Ellie was asleep on the couch, her laptop open to a map of Florence. I smiled, grateful for her stubborn loyalty. My family thought they'd left me behind, but they were wrong. They'd returned to a storm they couldn't escape. The airport was a swarm of noise and motion, but I stood still, my crutches traded for a cane, my heart pounding like a war drum. Ellie stood beside me, her phone ready to record, her eyes scanning the arrivals gate. My family's flight was due any minute, and we were ready to confront them. Leo had sent the final piece of evidence that morning, a recorded call between my father and Vitelli, discussing cleaning the funds through the villa purchases. It was damning, and Mia was poised to publish it the moment we got their reaction. Clara emerged first, her designer sunglasses perched on her head, a smug smile on her face. My parents followed, My father's stride confident. My mother's eyes distracted, as if she sensed something was off. I stepped forward, my cane clicking on the tile. "Welcome back," I said, my voice steady but laced with venom. Clara froze, her smile vanishing. My father's eyes narrowed, but my mother gasped, rushing toward me. "Nate. Oh, honey, you're okay." Her embrace felt hollow. A performance. I pulled back, holding up the envelope of documents Ellie had printed. "We need to talk," I said. "About Florence. About Vitelli." My father's face went pale, but he recovered quickly, laughing it off. "Business. Nate. You wouldn't understand." Clara smirked, but her eyes darted nervously to my father. They didn't know how much I knew. Ellie didn't waste time. "We have emails, bank records, and a recording," she said, her voice cutting through the airport din. "You're laundering money for a syndicate. And Claire's helping." My mother's hand flew to her mouth, but my father's jaw tightened. "You're out of your depth, son," he growled. "Walk away." But I didn't. I held his gaze, years of resentment boiling over. "You left me to die," I said, "and now you're drowning in your own lies." The confrontation escalated fast. Clara tried to deflect, claiming she was just assisting. But her voice cracked when I read aloud her email to Vitelli, promising full cooperation. My mother started crying, pleading ignorance. But my father snapped at her to be quiet. That's when Ellie hit record, capturing every word. "You think you can bury this?" My father hissed. "Vitelli's people will bury you first." The threat hung in the air, but I wasn't afraid. I'd survived a crash, their abandonment, and weeks of pain. They were the ones cornered now. Ellie sent the recording to Mia, who was already drafting her exposé. We left the airport, my family's protests echoing behind us. Back at my apartment, Mia called. The story was live. Headlined, "Real Estate Tycoon Tied to Italian Crime Syndicate." My father's empire was crumbling, but the fallout wasn't clean. My mother called me that night, sobbing, begging me to retract the story. "We're your family," she said. I wanted to feel pity, but all I felt was exhaustion. "You chose this," I told her. Clara, meanwhile, went silent, her social media dark. Leo warned that Vitelli's people might retaliate, so we moved to a safe house he'd arranged, a small cabin outside the city. There, Ellie and I planned our next steps. The story had sparked an investigation, and authorities were closing in on Vitelli. But my father was slippery, already spinning a narrative to paint himself as a victim. I knew he'd fight dirty, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. Ellie, ever my anchor, reminded me why we'd started this. "You're not just saving yourself," she said. "You're stopping them from hurting others." As the sun set over the cabin, I felt a strange peace. My family had left me for Italy, thinking they'd escape their sins. They had no idea I'd be the one to bring them down. But the fight wasn't over, and I knew the hardest battles were still ahead. The safe house was a cocoon of quiet, but danger lingered like a storm on the horizon. Ellie and I pored over Mia's article, now viral, with comments flooding in from strangers calling my father a crook. The authorities had frozen his accounts, and Vitelli's syndicate was scrambling to cover their tracks. But my father wasn't done. A late-night news segment showed him at a press conference, denying everything, claiming he'd been set up by a jealous son. Me. The lie stung, but Ellie's fury was palpable. "He's throwing you under the bus," she said, slamming her laptop shut. I nodded, my jaw tight. I'd expected denial, but not this. My mother, silent in the background of the broadcast, looked broken, her eyes avoiding the camera. Clara was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding from the fallout. Leo called with worse news. Vitelli's people were asking questions about me. "Stay low," he warned. "They don't like loose ends." We couldn't stay still, though. Mia connected us with a federal agent, Torres, who was building a case against Vitelli. Over a secure line, Torres grilled us on every detail, the emails, the recording, Sophia's documents. He was impressed but cautious. "Your father's a small fish," he said. "Vitelli's the real target. If you want to nail him, we need more." Ellie suggested Sophia. She'd gone quiet, spooked by the article, but she knew Vitelli's inner workings. Convincing her to testify was our next move. Ellie tracked Sophia to a small town in upstate New York, where she'd fled after the story broke. We drove through the night, my cane a constant reminder of my fragility. Sophia was a wreck when we found her, holed up in a motel, her eyes darting to every shadow. "They'll kill me," she whispered. But Ellie, with her quiet strength, convinced her to talk. Sophia handed over a USB drive with ledgers detailing Vitelli's entire operation. It was a jackpot, but it came with a cost. Sophia was now a target. And so were we. Back at the safe house, Torres confirmed the ledgers were enough to indict Vitelli and my father. But Clara was the wild card. She'd resurfaced, posting a cryptic message about family loyalty. I knew what it meant. She was doubling down, protecting my father. I called her, my voice shaking with years of unspoken hurt. "Why, Clara?" I asked. "Why choose him over me?" Her silence was deafening. Then a cold reply, "You never belonged with us, Nate." Her words were a knife, but they also freed me. I wasn't fighting for their love anymore. I was fighting for the truth. Torres arranged protection for Sophia, and we prepared for the next phase, testifying. The thought of facing my father in court made my stomach churn, but Ellie's hand in mine steadied me. "You're stronger than them," she said. "You always were." The days that followed were a blur of depositions and threats. Someone slashed the tires of our rental car. A warning from Vitelli's people. Leo tightened security, but the fear was constant. Yet, every time I faltered, Ellie was there, her belief in me unwavering. I started writing again, pouring my pain into songs about betrayal and redemption. One night, I played a rough melody for her, my voice raw. She cried, not from sadness, but pride. "This is who you are," she said. "Not their failure, but your triumph." As the trial loomed, I knew my family's world was collapsing. They'd left for Italy, thinking they'd outrun their choices. They had no idea I'd be the one to bring them to justice. Not just for me, but for everyone they'd hurt. The storm was here, and I was ready to face it. The courtroom was a battlefield, all polished wood and hushed whispers. But the tension was electric. I sat in the witness stand, my cane leaning against the chair, my eyes locked on my father across the room. He looked smaller somehow, his tailored suit unable to hide the strain in his face. Clara sat beside him, her expression unreadable, while my mother was absent, too fragile to attend. Her lawyer said. Ellie squeezed my hand before I took the oath, her presence a quiet strength. The prosecutor tore into my father's lies, presenting the emails, ledgers, and my recorded confrontation at the airport. I testified about the crash, their abandonment, and the moment I uncovered their scheme. My voice shook at first, but it grew steady as I described their betrayal not just of me, but of everyone they'd endangered through Vitelli's syndicate. The jury leaned forward, hanging on every word. My father's lawyer tried to paint me as a vengeful son, but the evidence was ironclad. Sophia's ledgers sealed his fate. Clara's testimony was worse. She took the stand, her eyes avoiding mine, and spun a story of coercion, claiming my father forced her to help. But the emails told a different story, her ambition, her eagerness. The prosecutor didn't hold back, exposing her lies. When she stepped down, she glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw the sister I'd loved. Then it was gone, replaced by defiance. I wanted to hate her, but all I felt was loss. Vitelli, indicted separately, had fled to Italy, but the feds were closing in. My father, though, was here, and the jury didn't take long. Guilty on multiple counts: money laundering, fraud, conspiracy. As the verdict was read, he didn't look at me. Clara did, her eyes brimming with tears. But I turned away. They'd made their choices. My mother called later, begging me to visit her. I said I'd think about it, but my heart wasn't ready. The trial's aftermath was chaos. Reporters hounded me, but Ellie shielded me, her fierce loyalty a wall against the world. Mia's article had sparked a movement, with others coming forward about Vitelli's schemes. The villas in Tuscany were seized, the profits funneled to victims of the syndicate's crimes. I felt a strange pride not in their fall, but in the good that came from it. Ellie and I moved back to my apartment, no longer hiding. But the threats didn't stop. A brick through my window one night proved Vitelli's reach was long. Leo suggested we relocate, but I refused. This was my home, my fight. I started performing again, small gigs at local bars. My songs raw and honest. Audiences connected, and for the first time, I felt seen, not as my father's failure, but as Nate, the survivor. Ellie was there for every show, her smile brighter than the stage lights. One night, after a set, she kissed me, and I knew we weren't just exes anymore. We were partners, forged in fire. But the past wasn't done with me. A letter arrived from my mother, handwritten and tear-stained, apologizing for everything. She claimed she didn't know the depth of my father's crimes, but she admitted she'd failed me. "Come home," she wrote. I didn't know if I could. Clara, now facing her own charges, had vanished, likely cutting a deal. The family I'd known was gone, and I was still learning who I was without them. As I stood on stage one night, singing about the crash and the truth I'd uncovered, I felt the weight of it all lift. My parents had left for Italy, thinking they'd escape. They had no idea I'd be their undoing, not out of spite, but because truth was stronger than their lies. The months after the trial were a strange rebirth. My father's conviction was a headline, but I was no longer just the tycoon's son. My music was gaining traction, small venues turning into packed rooms. My songs about betrayal and redemption striking a chord. Ellie was my constant, her laughter filling the gaps my family had left. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights, I'd wake in a cold sweat, the crash replaying in my mind, or Clara's cold words, "You never belonged with us," echoing like a curse. I visited my mother once, at her insistence. She lived in a small apartment now, the mansion sold to cover legal fees. She looked older, her eyes heavy with guilt. "I should have stayed," she said, clutching my hand. I wanted to forgive her, but the words stuck. I told her I needed time, and she nodded, tears falling. As I left, I felt a door close, not forever, but for now. She'd been complicit in her silence, and that was a wound I couldn't yet mend. Clara was another story. She'd taken a plea deal, testifying against Vitelli's associates to avoid prison. Leo tracked her to a coastal town, working under a new name. I wrote her a letter, not expecting a reply, pouring out the hurt and love I still carried. She didn't respond, but I heard through Leo she'd read it and cried. Maybe one day we'd talk, but I wasn't holding my breath. Some bridges stay burned. Vitelli's empire unraveled faster than my father's. The feds, armed with Sophia's ledgers, dismantled his network, arresting dozens. Sophia, now in witness protection, sent me a note through Torres. "You gave me courage." It was a small victory, but it mattered. The villas, once a symbol of greed, were repurposed as community centers, a quiet justice that felt right. Ellie and I built a life from the ashes. We moved to a new apartment, one with a balcony where I could play my guitar at sunset. She started a nonprofit, using her tech skills to help whistleblowers like Sophia. I wrote songs for her, for us, each one a step toward healing. The threats from Vitelli's remnants faded, But we stayed vigilant. Leo's warnings etched in our minds. One night, at a sold-out show, I dedicated a song to Ellie. The crowd roared, but her eyes were all I saw. After, she pulled me aside, her voice soft. "I'm proud of you, Nate. Not just for surviving, but for fighting." I kissed her, the weight of the past lighter than ever. My family had left me for Italy, thinking I'd break. They had no idea I'd rise. Not to destroy them, but to rebuild myself. The crash had taken my legs, my family, my old life. But it gave me something better: truth, purpose, and Ellie. As I strummed my guitar under the stars, I knew I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was Nate, whole and unafraid, with a future I'd fought for. My parents and Clara had their reckoning, but mine was a triumph, built on the ruins of their lies.